like every week at this time, there's a lot of people not in here. And they just kind of trickle in, don't they? 1 Samuel chapter 5. Let's do a little bit of review before we jump in. Here's what we've seen. Israel has been defeated in a battle. We saw at the beginning of Samuel's call to ministry, Samuel's dedication at the temple. We talked about the priest, Eli, and his sons and their problems. Chapter 4, Israel was defeated in this battle with the Philistines. We don't know a lot about the Philistines yet, but they're going to become a major problem. In that battle, Israel lost about 4,000 lives, 4,000 soldiers, and Israelites are wondering how this could happen. How could they be defeated? They determined, I think it was last week and maybe a couple weeks before that, they determined that the reason they lost the battle was because they did not bring the Ark of the Covenant with them. So the presence of God wasn't there. So they get that, sort of like this big good luck charm, right? They believe that the Ark will make a difference. So they bring in the Ark of the Covenant. The Philistines have the opposite reaction. Maybe they are afraid, but they stand and fight. And that text tells us that 30,000 Israelite foot soldiers were killed, along with the priests Hophni and Phinehas. Eli learns about his sons, and he dies of shock. He falls from his seat and dies. The ark has been captured. His death is followed by the death of his daughter-in-law when she gives birth to a son whom she names Ichabod. Who knows what Ichabod means? You got it? That's pretty much, yeah. Yeah, gone is the glory, or the glory of God is gone. Her son dying fulfills the prophecy that Eli's family will have no old age men. The men in your family will not reach an old age; they'll die young. So this ends the bloodline for them. She gives birth to a son, names him Ichabod, and it's over, right? So she dies, he dies, and all this stuff happens, right? Well, we pick up the story tonight with the Ark of the Covenant being taken by the Philistines. And you can see the direction that they go when they physically take the ark. They descend from the mountains of Shiloh, where this temple is, and they kind of go down the coast of what is now, I guess, I don't know, Phoenicia, or what used to be Phoenicia. They go down the coast and then back over to a place called Ashdod. Ashdod is the center of Philistine worship of a guy named Dagon. All right. Now, Dagon, I don't know. I will probably continue to call Dagon a he, but I don't know that he has a gender. It has a gender. Dagon was a god. We're not really sure what it looked like, but most people think that Dagon was sort of a mermaid. So it was like a half man, half fish type of thing. Dagon was there in Ashdod. This was a temple dedicated to him, and this is where we pick up the story. 1 Samuel chapter 5, verse 1. Then the Philistines took the ark of God and brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. When the Philistines took the ark of God, they brought it into the house of Dagon and set it by Dagon. And when the people of Ashdod arose in the morning, early in the morning, there was Dagon, fallen on its face to the earth before the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and set it in its place again. And when they arose early the next morning, there was Dagon, fallen on its face to the ground before the ark of the Lord. The head of Dagon and both the palms of its hands were broken off on the threshold. Only Dagon's torso was left of it. Therefore, neither the priests of Dagon nor any who come into Dagon's house tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. But the hand of the Lord was heavy on the people of Ashdod, and he ravaged them and struck them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory. And when the men of Ashdod saw how it was, they said, the ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is harsh toward us and Dagon our God. Now we're stopping in the middle of that passage, verse 7. We might catch up a little bit, but I think we're going to spend some time tonight on what is happening in these first few verses, right? So, how many of you think about, or what do you think about when I say words like idol worship? What pictures do you come up with? What do you think? What comes to mind? Idol worship. What do you think? You think of what? The little fat statue in the Chinese restaurants, right? You think of statues in Catholic churches of the saints? Ooh. Yeah, in a sense. Okay. So you think of little fat statues and you think of big. Okay. What else? Yeah. Yeah. Right. That's right. Okay. That's where I'm going a little bit. I don't know that I go there naturally or think about it, because when I hear idol worship in Scripture or just talking about it, I think of statues. I think of worshiping. And here's the deal: even if Miss Sarah is right that there is some worship in that sense, we don't really see it. We don't really experience it. You know what I mean? We don't really see people bow. That's what is that? Bagpipes. We don't really see people physically bow down and worship other things. Do we? I mean, do you see that? I think no. Be quiet, Daniel. No, I'm just kidding. No, we don't. And so I think you're exactly right, though. That's why we talk about this stuff. And I wrote down the things that you said. Beauty, and I think beauty goes with health or youthfulness, money, power, love, youth, and those things sort of manifest themselves into stuff. You talk about phones, money, success. All these things have become our source or what receives worship for us. And so what I was going to say was that I don't think I've ever seen anyone actually bow down to a false god. I don't think that I've ever witnessed that. Really? Yeah. Really? Okay. So you see it, you know what I mean? Yeah. Well, and what Daniel said was that you don't see that even in Christian worship. You know, we don't see Christians physically bow down and worship, not in this church anyway. There are some denominations where that's more popular. So the alternative is, and the answer, what I'm getting at, is that even though we don't see this type of worship, and I certainly don't think that we are expected to bow down and worship false gods. Nobody's ever said to you, if you don't do this, you're going to lose your freedom or you're going to lose your job. You know what I mean? We don't see that so much. What we see is much more subtle. We see people worshiping stuff, success, money, right? And so we spend time, we spend money, we spend resources, we spend energy on things that look like, if you really think about it, it looks kind of like worship. And so if our culture, if our society was frozen in time, some catastrophic thing happened, and 1,000 years from now, people come and dig up our remains, what are they going to think is important to us? What did we do? What was the most important thing? Would they understand our beliefs? Would they say that everybody carried one of these things around, so it had to be a big deal? I don't know. God tends to show disobedience in circumstances over time. When we find ourselves worshiping false gods, and that's probably what I'm going to say many times tonight, and I don't want to mislead you, but I'm talking about these little g gods that we worship day in and day out. Sometimes it's social acceptance. Sometimes it's relationships. Sometimes it's our kids. Sometimes it's baseball. Sometimes it's a job, success, money, cars. That one hits kind of close to home, Daniel. So we talk about the stuff, right? When we worship those things, when we give ourselves over to those false gods, God reminds us, God has a way of dealing with it the way that he did here, okay? So the Philistines, verse 1, they took the ark of God and brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod, right? We don't exactly know where this Ebenezer is. It's not the Ebenezer that we hear about later, but it is close to Shiloh because that's where the ark was staying, and that's where we think the battle was. And so the Philistines took the ark of God, and they bring it into the house of Dagon. And so the people of Ashdod arose early in the morning, okay? Now I want you to just think about this. This is a group of people in a community, in a civilization. I've told you that the Israelites are in the Promised Land, and the Promised Land is full of pagan worshipers, people who worship things and images and statues, and Dagon was just one of them, just one of many. Dagon was the god of prosperity, agriculture, and fertility. We don't exactly know what the name Dagon means, but it probably comes from the Sumerian word for grain. And so this was the god that provided life in so many ways for people, right? And so the Philistines take this Ark of the Covenant, the Ark of God, and they put it inside their temple next to their statue. Why do you think they would do that? When the Philistines took the Ark of God, they brought it into the house of Dagon and set it by Dagon. Why do you think they would do that? An offering, okay? There you go. Do you think that they expected something to happen with it? Yeah. Yeah, possibly. It could be that they were polytheistic, right? That they worship several gods, and so they're just adding one to it. Yeah. What's weird to me, if you can do this with me, it would help. Can you imagine actually thinking that God was in that box? Can you put yourself there? That's hard for me, but to go, what if the thing that I believed in was I could physically look at and go, it's in there? Because that's the way the Israelites were acting, right? Because they bring the ark and they go, well, if we bring the ark, then God is with us, and so we'll win the battle. And so the Philistines are going, yeah, their God is in that box. I don't know what that does to people, but they bring that ark, that symbol, that thing. They go, their God is in here, but he's already lost. Their God has lost this battle. So I'm with you. I think it was somewhat of a sacrifice, somewhat an offering. I think it was a way for them to say, our God is better than your God. So they put the Ark of the Covenant in there to be in submission to Dagon. And so when the people of Ashdod arose early in the morning, verse 3, they're going to worship, right? They're just going to show up. So here's where this passage really hits home for me. I could say it a lot of different ways, but I just wrote this down. Sinful people experience victory. Okay, I wrote it down like that because I've thought a lot about this. You've heard the saying, why do bad things happen to good people? Why do good? So I can understand that question. The opposite side of it is much harder for me. Why do good things happen to bad people? That's the part that I can't get. I understand that God is carrying you and me through things, and life can be difficult because He's trying to teach us, but why do good things happen to bad people? So sinful people can experience victory. Give me some examples of that. No, don't tell me their names. Give me some examples of lost people can experience victories. How? How so? Tell me. They can make money. They can be successful. They can have great jobs and be powerful. Yes, absolutely. Is that weird to you? That's what? Norm? Yeah. What'd you say, Miss Pam? Right. Right. That's right. How else? How else can they experience victory? They can be successful. They can make money. They can have children. They can have big families. Oh, yeah. He said bullies at school tend to be more popular. That's true. You know, they can have successful marriages. That one's really hard for me. I can tell you why. She's asking, how can two lost people have a seemingly successful marriage, long, happy marriage? I'll tell you the seminary answer. What I learned is that marriage was a creation ordinance. Marriage was there, in a sense, before Christianity was. Yeah, Jimmy didn't like that. But since creation since marriage was an ordinance for created beings and not only Christians, they can also have successful marriages. Does that make sense? Does it help a little bit? No? Yeah, that's right, yeah. That's what I learned in seminary. I haven't thought a lot about it, but yes, I am confused because if you don't know Jesus, then you can't love, right? If you don't know Jesus, then you can't actually love anybody or anything. I think that's true. And so I don't understand how people can be happily married without Jesus. I don't know, but they are. And I wouldn't want to define success that way, but I mean, it seems like it. So there are other ways that sinful people can experience victories. Lost people can be successful. Lost people can make it. They can have children. They can have jobs. They can have marriages and buy houses and cars and do all these things. And what you're realizing as I'm saying all that is that I'm talking about earthly success. You know what I mean? We're talking about things that we can see and things that we can sort of touch and go, okay, I get this. That's what's happening to the Philistines, is that they are experiencing some earthly victory. God allowed them to win in battle against His people, the Israelites. He allowed them to win. He allowed them to take the Ark of the Covenant. Now, they don't hold on to it for long, but He allowed them to take it. And so whatever that time period is, it was not a lot of distance that they had to travel to get the Ark to where it was going. How did they move it? Do you remember that go ahead. I mean, I didn't think God let ungodly people touch the Ark. I don't know. Who was it that was allowed to carry it? Was it the Levites, the priests? And so, I don't know how they moved it. I don't know how they carried it. I don't know why God would allow any of those things. And that's what I carry into my life today to go, why does God let people get by? Why does it feel like ungodly people are winning? Yeah. You think that's what he's doing today? I'm not talking about as a nation. I'm talking about us as a people. Think so? I say one of the hardest parts about living for Christ is that we're not guaranteed that type of success, you know? And that wouldn't make sense either. If everyone that became a Christian became wealthy and had a better marriage and you know, better job, then I guess everybody would want to be a Christian, right? So it doesn't work that way. But that is one of the hardest things for me. And is Ira's in here? He's asleep. Somebody wake him up. Ira and we said we'd talk about this a little bit, but Ira invited me to his house this morning, and we were able to in his living room, lead two ladies to the Lord, a woman and her daughter. It was unbelievable. It was great. So thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of that. But we were able to say to them in that conversation, we believe that life is going to get better. We believe that things are going to make sense now. We believe that you have purpose and that you're saved forever, for all of eternity. It's the best decision that you can ever make. The only decision that matters is right here. You just did it. You're good. We're so excited. But it doesn't mean that everything's going to be perfect. It doesn't mean that life will be easy. It just means that it'll make sense. And so that to me is one of the hardest things about the Christian life, is that it's still difficult. And God allows people who don't know him, people who are not living for him, to sort of make it. Okay? So here's the Philistines. They early in the morning, they show up to worship, and what do they think? Right? So the Ark of the Covenant comes in, and they put it in this temple next to Dagon, their god, and they show up in the morning to worship. They show up in the morning to worship their god Dagon, and that thing has fallen over, right? So what a shock for them. Okay, that's a big deal. That's a shock. This is their temple. Now, I want you to really think about this, because I don't know what it looked like. I don't know what the statue, if it was a merman, I don't know. But if whatever it looked like, it would not have been thrown up. Did I say that right? It would not have been set up temporarily. You know what I mean? It was there permanently. It's not like it was just leaning over in the corner. This is the center of their worship. The thing that they come into in the mornings, they come in to worship this God, right? Big deal. And they come in and it's fallen over in front of the ark, okay? That is a huge thing. So here's what happens. Imagine the excuses. Fallen on its face to the earth before the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and set it in its place again. What do you think some of the excuses might have been? Earthquake. That's the first one I wrote down. Earthquake. Were earthquakes common? I don't know. In that area? Before global warming? What else? Earthquake? Somebody bumped it. It's pretty fragile, right? Really? Jerry thinks they knew. Okay. So, this is verse 3. When the people of Ashdod arose early in the morning, there was Dagon fallen on its face. And I'm speculating. I'm not adding to Scripture, but I'm telling you, I just can imagine what happened, that they set it back up, that the priest said, oh, sorry, it's not, this is what happened, whatever. Then we get to verse 4, and it happens again. Verse 4, it starts just like verse 3. When they arose early the next morning, there was Dagon, fallen on its face to the ground before the ark of the Lord. Now, before you go any further, what about 2 days in a row? What do they do there? Could you imagine the priests on night one, on the first night? Could you imagine the conversations that they have? Hey, we need to make sure that this doesn't happen again. We need to secure it. We need to fix it, whatever it is. They bring in the craftsmen. They bring in whatever they can, the workers, and they go, whatever we need to do, let's make sure that this doesn't happen again. And do you think more people showed up on the next morning? No? Okay, you think they were scared? I'm wondering. I'm wondering if more people were curious, if they're trying to figure out, is this going to happen? Was that a fluke? Was that a mistake? Was that just? And listen, I know that all this is speculation. Maybe none of this happened. Maybe it was like just not a big deal. But here, they arose early the next morning. There it was. Dagon had fallen on his face to the ground before the ark of the Lord. But this time, middle of verse 4, the head of Dagon and both the palms of its hands were broken off on the threshold. Only Dagon's torso was left. So, lost people will experience victories, what feels like success, what I see in a lot of ways as victory. But here are the things that I know about that. I would say first that success is temporary. And I mean, I'm pulling that straight from this passage. In Dagon's case, it was very temporary. God would not be mocked in this way. But this rude awakening, to go on the second day and to see Dagon not only down again, but properly positioned in a way to make him prostrate, you know what I mean? Laying down face first in the sand, whatever the reason, whatever they're talking about, you know what I mean? But Dagon is now, and this is what's amazing, Dagon is now in the hands of not just God, but an angry God. See, that changes things. Dagon is an idol. Dagon is false. Here's what's amazing. There's nothing even there, right? The Dagon statue is literally nothing. It's just some material, probably bronze, right? There's no personality there. So God is dealing with the Philistines and dealing with their God, but I find myself thinking that God is in some way fighting with some other little g God, or like there's this battle, but there's really not. It's just physical material. And so God is proving that he is the only true God, right? So what happens then? Okay, put yourself in the situation. Jerry says that they knew what was happening. The second day that they go in, their God is down again, prostrate, face down before the Ark of the Covenant. Hands are gone, cut off, and the head is gone, so the only thing that's there is the torso. If you're a priest in that temple, what conclusion do you come to? You get out of there fast, okay? That's fair. What do you think happened? You think they knew in some way? So got the new one. This one's better. It's go ahead. Right. Right. Okay, so what do people do when their God, the thing that they worship, the thing that they have put up on a pedestal, their idol, what do most people do when that fails, when that doesn't work? What do they do? Move to another one. That's what she said. That's what Derek said. They move to another type of pleasure. And Yeah. Right. So they've got this choice now, right? They've got this option. Their God, their deity, their statue, whether it was gold, metal, wood, whatever, we don't know. Whatever it was, it now has to go in the repair shop again. Somebody's got to fix it. And you and I have this ability. We know the story. We know the truth. We know what the Ark of the Covenant is. We know who God is. We kind of get it. But I wonder if we, like Daniel was saying, would be drawn to that, where we would go, hey, wait a minute, maybe there is something to this Ark of God, this Israelite God. Maybe that is the issue here. They have that choice. They can serve the one true God and switch over and go, obviously, we don't need to mess with this thing. We don't need to mess with this people. They could go so many directions. They could go to the Israelites and say, hey, look, we brought this thing in. It's causing some trouble. What's the deal? And they have so many opportunities to go in the right direction. Or they can start a new tradition. And that's what they do. It's amazing. This is what they do. Materialism. Yep. And people turn to things, right? And so I feel like what Deidre said and what Derek said is that we can just kind of trade in and out. You know what I mean? If this thing that I'm worshiping right now doesn't work, I'm going to turn to something else. Sometimes it's an abusive a substance. You know what I mean? If this thing is not working, if I'm not making it in my career, I'm going to turn to something else. I'm going to be really good in another area. So some people who don't make it in their career, really turn into gambling or something because they can be good at it. Or they turn into some abusive situation, some substance that they get into, right? And so you trade one little g god for another one, and that's kind of what these people do. The head of Dagon and both the palms of its hands were broken off on the threshold. The threshold is nothing. It's just the entrance into the temple complex for them, where you cross the line, where you're going to worship. Only Dagon's torso was left of it. So what they decided to do is verse 5, and it blows my mind. Rather than turn to God, Ark of the Covenant, Yahweh, therefore, because of this insane situation, neither the priest of Dagon nor any who come into Dagon's house tread on the threshold of Dagon to this day. Don't touch that. That's holy. Because the threshold is where the hands and the head were broken off. Okay. So get mad at me for a minute. What traditions do we worship today? Or do we? Do we worship any traditions? I see Linda nodding her head, but she's not going to answer. Could be. Yeah. Yeah. Christmas traditions. I don't have an answer. I'm not trying to feed you. Go ahead, Paul. Yeah. Okay. Right. It's part of life. I agree. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Right. So what I see the Philistines doing is what I think a lot of people do today. They reject God regardless of evidence, right? And so this is what they do. The Philistines, the priests at least, wanted this to be an accident. They wanted it to be a coincidence. And so I told you that I started with sinful people experiencing victories, but I said that success is temporary. I want you to believe that it's temporary. God will make it. God will not be mocked, right? Their success is temporary. But what I see happening with people who are experiencing temporary success, worldly success here, what I see happening is they focus on the wrong thing. And so when one thing doesn't work, they focus on something else. They switch over. And so listen, we love to make tradition, accident, and coincidence. And what has happened today is we call it things like the universe. The universe is trying to tell you something, you know. Mother Nature is doing this. The world, right? And I see this happening to the Philistines is they want to take what you and I can explain without any problem. They want to say that it was an accident. There's just something amazing, something that's unexplainable or coincidence, right? Can you think of anything in our culture that people consider accidental or coincidental, regardless of how much evidence there is pointing towards a God? Can you think of anything? Let me give you one. I said, can you think of anything that today people consider to be accidental or coincidental, despite the evidence supporting God or God's work? Yeah, I think creation and the beginning of everything is probably the best example. It's the one I was thinking of is what what people call the Big Bang theory or random chance or what I would call maybe evolution on a large scale, macro evolution. Um, but I mean, even more than that, I'm not even just talking about these major events. I'm saying that uh, the Philistines. Now, answer this question. Let me ask you this: why do you think that the priests explained it like they did? You'll be better at that question. Why did the Philistines respond or react to Dagon falling over the way that they did? In verse 5, they sort of made it a thing. To this day, nobody steps on the threshold because of this event. Why? Go ahead, Jerry. Hmm. That's good. Yeah. He said they considered the head and the hands removed from the statue as meaning something. It was a big deal to them. They took it seriously. And maybe that's the way they responded the way they did. Well, and you and I know the way that we would have liked them to respond. We would have liked them to start worshiping the real God, right? But they didn't. Here's why I think they do that. Worshiping God instead of blaming things on an accident or a coincidence, or to worship God instead of success or beauty or youthfulness or money or whatever. To worship God, it means that you have to change. You know what I mean? And the Philistine priests didn't want to change. They didn't want to admit that their God was false. They didn't want to move everybody to the worship of the one true God, to say that obviously we were wrong and this is the God that exists. And so to change that, to change their culture would change everything for their life. Right? You know what I mean? And I think that's sort of what happens today, is that people don't, even in the smallest degree, I don't think people want to come to church because they're afraid that it's going to necessitate some change in their life. Even to the extent of, I got to get up earlier. It's harder. When's the last time you had to get up and get kids ready for church? You know what I mean? Those days are hard. And so if you get used to it, if you get accustomed to just sleeping in on Sunday, or Sunday being the day that you cut your grass, that's a difficult transition for people. It really is. But even more than that, to say that you want to give your life to Jesus, to say, I'm going to worship the one true God, it requires some change, right? Give me some examples. What are some ways that your life had to change when you met Jesus? Yeah. Yeah. Any of you lose friends when you started living for Jesus? That's hard. I mean, it is for me. Relationships are important to me, and friendships are important. And so it's hard for me to lose friends because I want to be honest with them. You know what I mean? And I have had conversations with some of my lifelong friends and said, not I'm better than you, and not I can't do the things that you do anymore, but like, hey, I'm kind of going in a different direction, and we don't have a lot in common anymore. That's tough. I've regretted some of those conversations. Any of you lost family? Yeah, sure. My wife's family's not real Christian. You know, I could explain that to you if you wanted me to, but it's not very popular in her family either. You know what I mean? They don't really understand why we do what we do. Go ahead, Paul. That's right. Yeah. Right. Well, I want to talk about other people, but I pick on Jimmy a lot just because he's right there. But I imagine it's not always popular to be a follower of Jesus on the Memphis police force. That's hard sometimes, I would think. Some of you have jobs, friends, relationships like that, but I want you to think about it. You know, the things that changed for you. And I'm not trying to change you tonight. I'm not trying to say anything except that people who experience these short-term victories, they tend to focus on the wrong things, and they're worried about the change and the life change, and they don't want to do it because of what they think it's going to take. And so, like the Philistines, so many people today focus on the threshold, because it's easier to worship the threshold than it is to change your life to worship the one true God. It's easier to deal with the little things. It's easier because the success almost feels like we can get it and reach it, and the money and the acceptance and the friends and the things that we don't want to deal with almost seem easier than going, I'm going to give everything over to the Lord and change all of that. Okay, so everything that I just said, I hope helps you understand that lost people will experience victories short term in this life, in this existence. And I think that happens and continues to happen because they focus on the wrong thing. They jump from one thing to the next, and you and I know the truth, right? Here's the hope that comes, and I know we only have a couple minutes, but here's the hope that follows. So sinful people experience victories that will happen, but you and I find some relief, and judgment is never real heartwarming for us, but I said it like this: God judges wickedness, no doubt about it. God judges sin. God judges wickedness. You see this in the rest of the chapter. You see it in the next few verses. The hand of the Lord was heavy on the people of Ashdod, verse 6. And he ravaged them and struck them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory, the whole surrounding area. I'm not going to read that again because a couple of young people just walked in, but he struck them with. Did you read that verse? Man, that's frightening to me. It really is. Yeah. Yeah. And they finally get it. Verse 7. When the men saw how it was, they said, the ark of God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is harsh toward us and Dagon, our God. And then verse 8 is the next part of the story. So they sent and gathered to themselves all the lords of the Philistines and said, what shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel? And I'm going to end there because that is a pretty great question. Pretty good question for you and for me. What shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel? The presence. What do we do with God's presence? I think that's pretty neat. And if we could get lost people to ask that question, it'd change a lot for this country, this world. It'd change a lot for the kingdom. If we could get people who don't know Jesus, who are living in these temporary successes and victories, if we could get them to say, what shall we do with the presence of the one true God? I think it'd change a lot. I really do. Okay, we'll pick up there next week. If I remember, verse 8 and following of 1 Samuel chapter 5. Okay, any questions or thoughts? Anything I missed? Anybody want to add anything? Okay. We got a couple of minutes. We got plenty of time. I'd like to take some prayer requests. Anything that you have or know about, anything I can add, just tell me. We'll add it. We'll pray here tonight. I'm trying to remember the email that you sent this morning, Miss Sarah. Somebody's, Kathy Witten's niece? Okay. Good. That's fine. That's okay. All right. Anybody else? Okay. You want to tell us how Nana is? She's okay. Sir? Nana Ashley is, Miss Sarah and I both saw her yesterday, and I didn't tell you this, but she talked to, we had conversations with her. Good, good. So she's kind of back and forth with communicating and not communicating, but I don't know. Most of you know Nana. Can I ask how old she is? 97? Wow. So she's up here at King's Daughters and Sons. So pray for Nana, of course. Pray for the family.